double turnover. And I'm Bill Fossey, I'm the Anchorage Municipal Manager. I'm going to let Ralph do the bulk of the presentation, but I thought it would be helpful to start with just a bit of high-level orientation to what we're talking about and why we're making this proposal. The municipality of Anchorage owns Merrill Field Airport, and it is run as an enterprise fund, which means that it is supported entirely by the businesses and the people who use the airport. It does not receive taxpayer funds. And we discovered during the last budget process that structurally it was running an annual deficit of about $200,000. And there were some questions from the Assembly about why that was and what we need to do about it. And we said we need a little bit of time to do a bit more research. We now completed that research, and there were 4 things that we had to sort all the way out before we could give you a better explanation of why that was happening. The first was that structural deficit was being masked by proceeds from a land exchange that happened some number of years ago. We've all but drawn down, we have completely exhausted the proceeds of that land exchange. The second was, we moved from a world in which we were paying almost nothing for PeopleSoft to now everybody's paying a tremendous amount for SAP, which meant that the intergovernmental charges for Merrill Field significantly increased. And that is a real, meaningful business expense for an enterprise fund, because unlike general government, where the IGCs are collected and then sorted out before the individual directors even see any of the money to spend, that is a bill that we send to the airport to say, for your use of SAP, you must transfer to general government a good amount of money. I think that moved the needle around $100,000. Third, for several years, we were charging administrative overhead expenditures to various FAA grants, and we realized, after receiving some notification from the FAA, that we were charging more to those grants than we should have been charging. And so not only did we have several years where it looked like our overhead expenses were artificially low, we then had some years where we had to make up for that old shortfall, so the change was pretty dramatic. And then last, we've had the happiness problem of being the beneficiary of a lot of FAA Airport Improvement Program grants, which means we have been doing really well getting federal money to do dynamic compaction programs or security updates at the airport. But virtually all of those federal grants come with a local match requirement. It's not much, it's like 6.25%, but we've got to find that money somewhere. And when we have been more successful in the federal rain-making game than we have been before, we're actually at the point now we still don't have the money to do all of the projects. So we found ourselves in a circumstance where, because of those 4 things, we were running these annual $200,000 a year structural deficits. And I think that leads us in the Assembly to a fork in the road. We have at least 3 options. One of them is to say, we like the airport model we have, and we want to rain all those capital grants down on us, so we need to raise more revenue. So the businesses who are operating there will pay increased lease rates, and those who are doing airport tie-downs will pay increased tie-downs, and it's sort of fee-for-service model. And that's the proposal that you have in the 2 ordinances in front of you. The second is we could just do less. We could say it would be great to rain down 93 to 7% match federal grants, but we just don't have the money. So we have to pass on the 93 cents because we don't have the 7 cents to do it. There are some projects on the list that we are currently anticipating doing. We're open to the conversation. Maybe we do want to pass, and that will, of course, have less revenue impacts. And last would be to find some other kind of subsidy. If there's no additional money to be raised from the airport, and we don't want to do less on the capital side, money's got to come from somewhere. Certainly you've seen some resolutions from the Merrill Field Advisory Commission that Merrill Field is somewhat unique in the state, and that it is self-supporting, and a lot of other airports in the state do get subsidized by the governments. We have not felt as an administration that we are in a place to cross that Rubicon. I think the needs of general government are still not totally fulfilled, and taking the step of taking taxpayer dollars and putting it to the airport is really one that we're not comfortable proposing at this point. But that tees up the conversation. So with that general high-level orientation, I will retreat to eat the rest of my lunch in the back of the room, but hand it over to Ralph to us all of the details.
And let me pause for a moment. Thank you, Mr. Falsey. Do members of the committee have questions? Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Thanks, Ms. LaFrance. I'll ask this, and then if it's more appropriate to wait, we can. But how reasonable are the fees that are currently being charged, and the proposal, how does that compare to other?
That's the bulk of the
Okay. And then my other question, and feel free to tell me if you want me to wait, is how did the former director of this not notice it? And I mean, it's great that we've found it out now, but it seems that we missed an opportunity to use that money that we had from a land exchange for something else and charge appropriate fees. So I'm just wondering sort of what happened.
he's not here, so I would have to answer the question for him. But I think in his defense, part of what's happening here is this is during the PeopleSoft to SAP transition. So, I mean, Paul Bowers, former director, was keenly aware that his intergovernmental charges were increasing and had asked us to fully interrogate that, and we have fully interrogated that, but the hard reality is that we were sort of underpaying for PeopleSoft because we weren't maintaining that system, and then we bought a very expensive SAP system, and that really did move the needle in kind of an unavoidable way. In the transition from PeopleSoft to SAP, there was a time period where we sort of lost visibility into the amount of money that was left over from the land proceeds, and that was all transition. You know, we had to pick up all the account balances in the old PeopleSoft system and move to SAP. So I'm not sure there was perfect clarity in knowing that we were going to reach this point when we did. But I'll also say, you know, it was an unreasonable decision to say that we will use those land proceeds to keep the rates from changing for as long as we can keep the rates from changing. I mean, the land proceed money was spendable money, and I guess there was an alternative universe where you could have raised rates earlier and kept a cushion in the bank, but there's no real need for us to just war chest bank money at the airport. We're not trying to generate profit necessarily. We're just trying to operate the airport. So I think with all that,
can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
Actually, so the muni itself couldn't use the money if we were to have saved it through raising rates earlier because it's a distinct entity. So there wasn't the opportunity, for instance, to change the rates 3 years ago to recognizing what it actually cost to have the airport function and then use that extra $400,000 or whatever it is on homelessness, for instance.
So I have a partial answer to that, which is that we haven't, but I suppose we could declare some kind of dividend from the enterprise and say you're making a profit, we're taking a share of it. But the second and the fuller answer is I'll probably have to phone a friend. I don't know what strings were attached with the exchange money, whether that was spendable by anybody or whether that had FAA strings attached to it. Maybe Alex or Amy or Ralph knows the answer to that. It's not something we could research, but in some ways it's the past is the past and the money is gone, so we don't have.
I believe it had FAA strings, hadn't spent on the airport. Because the land was initially purchased by the FAA. So when we got those dollars, we had to use them for airport research. Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn Davidson. Mr. Constant?
Yeah, just to follow up on that. I don't know if I haven't seen a table that shows us where those funds were expended or how, but what I just heard you say, and I just want to reiterate this, is if I heard correctly, those dollars were all spent on airport operations, and in fact it offset the need to raise money from other sources up until this point.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Thank you, Mr. Walmsley. If there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and turn to Mr. Gibbs.
Thank you, sir. For everyone in the audience, I am Ralph Gibbs. I'm the new airport manager. I thought I would take just a moment to explain a little bit of the background on what AIP actually is, what it stands for. It's the acronym that we use for Airport Improvement Program dollars that the FAA provides to airports across the country. To get those dollars, airports have to have 10,000 operations per year, enplanements actually. Merrill Field is the second busiest airport in the state, second only to Ted Stevens. The operations that we have there include things such as touch and goes, mostly from the flight schools, overflights, instrument approach procedures, and other operations. And we have to have 10,000 enplanements. And so you might be familiar with on-demand air charter. When someone wants to go from Merrill Field to someplace else in the state, that's considered a charter operation. There's an enplanement. We have to have 10,000 of those per year. If we do, we rate $1 million from the FAA every year. Now that's significant when you take a look at my next slide. Okay, eye chart here. Remember the $1 million. Down here on the left-hand side, you can see that in 12, 13, and 14, there was a $4 million. Then there was a $1.9 million, then $1.6 million. But in 2015, it spikes to nearly $7 million that the FAA was willing to invest in Merrill Field. Then it goes to 8, then to 11, and then to 12. And then for this last 2019, it's 9.7 million. Remember the percentages that Bill just mentioned? At one point, the FAA provided 95%, the state provided 2.5%, and we, Merrill Field, had to come up with the other 2.5%. It's now down to, check my paper burning, the FAA is going to provide 93.75%, and we have to come up with the other 6.25%. So the message here is there's a trend line that shows from 12 up to 19 a very steep rise in how much money the FAA was willing to invest in Merrill Field. Now the significance of these lines down at the bottom, those are the matching funds. Now in comparison, they're rather small unless you don't have those matching funds. And you can see here that we had the matching funds until 2018, then we had to come up with $670,000, not including debt service. And then in 2019, for those projects that are on the table, we had to come up with another $610,000, not including any debt service. So these last two lines for 18 and 19 are behind the AOAM that the CFO has put in to borrow $1.6 million. Aha! Another eye chart. So I'm trying to display revenue against expense at the airport and the land exchange funds of $4.5 million. So you can see from 11, 12, 13, 14, we were making more than we were spending. So that's good. All of a sudden in 15, there's a spike. Merrill Field used some of those airport dollars to pay for airport improvement that was not funded by the FAA. There was a roof repair, there was a ramp that was built for the hospital, and that's what that spike in dollars is in around 2015. But you can see that the land exchange funds dropped down to zero 2018, which is when we had to start borrowing money. You can see from about 15, 16, 17, and 18 that the gap between revenue and expense is about $200,000. But it was masked by those land exchange dollars, ironically, until I showed up. I'm just saying.
Mr. Gibbs?
Yes, ma'am.
Let me just interrupt for a second. When you say mask, could you explain a little bit about that?
So what I mean by mask is we have that asset, and so we're running in the red, but we could borrow from that to pay our operating expenses. So the pain wasn't there, it wasn't obvious. We would just rob Peter to pay Paul and keep on operating. Now I'm speaking in the rear, so to speak. I don't know what my predecessor was thinking. I would like to say that, of course, I can't do anything about the past. I can only inherit the past and go forward and try to fix things.
Thank you. Mr. Constant?
Two questions. I think did you intend to use the word borrow? Because borrow implies return. And so, more so, it was a liquid asset that was available for a need that was used. Like, it wasn't a loan that was intended to be paid back into that land exchange fund, was it?
No. I use that term for the $1.6 million for the 18 and 19 matching fund requirements.
You just used it now for we borrowed the money from this fund because we had the need. I just want to be clear.
I stand corrected.
It wasn't intended to be a loan from Fund A to Fund B. It was covering expenses and resources we had.
Yes, sir.
If I could add that, it's not an unreasonable thing either. We don't have any guarantee of receiving future FAA grants of this magnitude. So to look at our savings account and say, well, one-time expense money, we'll put it to a one-time expense. If next year we stop getting FAA grants altogether, the problem becomes less severe because we no longer have any matching requirement. So to say mass, I guess maybe that's causing confusion. The budget balanced only because we were drawing out our savings account. Right now our savings account.
And then follow up one quickly. This is more down in the weeds, but you mentioned our hospital ramp was paid for. Did the hospital pay us for that?
No, And I have a slide that will show you what I intend to do about that.
Okay, thank you.
A couple of slides down.
Thank you, Mr. Cossett. Thank you, Mr. Gibbs.
So, our history, we've been running in the red for the last 4 years, but those land exchange dollars made it not so visible. The debt service for the matching funds for the 18-19, which is the 1.6 million that CFO Alex and team will be discussing, my annual payment is $152K. So with my airport CFO and I, we put together a plan where we can cover the $200K shortfall and the $152K for the debt service and start putting money away to pay for future matching requirements. So to address all of that brings us to what I'm asking for approval from the Assembly. I want to increase tie-down and vehicle parking fees. I want to charge fees for services previously given away for free, and I have slides that will tell you what those things are. I want to increase lease rates by 4 cents per square foot, going from 21 cents currently to 25 cents per square foot. I want to increase rental rates. One of those rental rates is tied to the hospital. And I want to bring in some innovation to try to find ways to increase revenue without raising rates more or in the future. So raising the permanent parking rates going for the tail ends, going from $60 to $70 a month. Pull-throughs, going from $70 to $80 a month. Transient aircraft parking is going from $5 to $6 a day. Perhaps that really needs to be a little bit more. I'm just saying, $1. Summertime, if folks are coming to visit us, maybe we could make some more money there. Vehicle parking fees, we have RVs and vehicles that are parked on the airport. We're going to increase those rates from 45 to 70. And for the 40-foot, 55 to 80, and I believe that we're probably half of what anyone else in the municipality is charging for long-term parking. We're going to increase the fuel tax by 2 cents.
Mr. Gibbs?
Yes, ma'am.
We have a question from Ms. Zeletel.
Thank you. Before we move on to the next slide, can you provide some context for the airport parking fees and the aircraft parking fees? I'm not familiar with what other charges would be other places. Can you give me something to compare this to?
So to compare us to,
is there anything comparable? I mean, I don't know what's a reasonable amount to park an aircraft.
so I could provide after the fact what the tie-down rates are at the other airports in the municipality.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
A tail end with electricity at Lakewood is $55 presently.
Sir, would you identify yourself again for the record?
Terry Cartini.
Ms. Zeletel, do you have any?
That's good. Thank you. And I would appreciate that information, Mr. Gibbs.
If I might add to that, just also other airports out of state, just kind of a good average that's kind of market-based, not just Alaska.
Okay. So previously, we have been doing dock prep at no charge to anyone. So we're now going to charge for that. If you want a new lease or change your lease, there's going to be a fee for that. This is kind of a sensitive issue. We've had leaseholder customers come through and smash into our gates, and the gates are $3,500 each. And in the past, we were eating that cost. Don't know why, but we're not anymore. From time to time, folks will come to the office and they will want some service provided, and we've been giving that away for free. Or they'll ask our maintenance team, can you come do this for us? Instead of hiring it out, they come over and ask maintenance to do some various support services, and we're not going to do that for free anymore. Sometimes there are incidents or accidents and our maintenance team needs to tow an aircraft. We're not going to do that for free anymore. And if you want to change your mind about where your parking spot is, and we have that, I don't like where I'm located, I want a new spot, there is a fee for that from now on.
Actually,
Go.
Question for
Yes,
Ms.
ma'am.
Lowenthal?
yeah, this is actually for Mr. Falsey. Do we have similar types of where we're charging for those kind of fees in either other departments or enterprises within the municipality that will kind of provide us some information on our comparison point for what Merrill Field wants to do?
Through the chair, I'll have research that and get back.
Okay, thank you.
So going from 4 cents, going up by 4, 21 to 25. So what's that all about? We have apron lights, and we're paying the electric bill for the aprons where our leaseholders are located, and we've been eating the cost for that. The security gates, we talked about that. We pick up their snow and move it to a central location. There's been no charge for that. We've been taking their credit cards and not charging any kind of fee, although we're charged a fee. So we're going to recoup that. We've added a call-out security. So if someone identifies an interloper on the airport, we're going to pay a new fee to get security to come check that out. And of course, our stormwater, we're paying about $600 a year for our, what's it called? Our permit. So we have a $600 bill a year, which is pencil dust, right? But we also have a $30,000 a year requirement to have inspections accomplished and an SOP on all of our stormwater. So we either eat that cost as the airport, or we have each leaseholder do it individually. I don't think they would want to take on the additional work to do that, and I don't know that it would be cost effective. So we are increasing by 4 for all of these things that we are doing or have been doing. Okay, so here's the medevac. For now, all we're doing is increasing their rent, if you will, by 10%. And when we spent $1.2 million for that, I don't think that that's fair, and so I need to make that a separate issue and talk with them about getting a better return on our dollar.
Can I ask a question?
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Could you please explain what you mean when we spend $1.2 million? Are you saying that's the cost to the airport of having this, therefore the fees aren't appropriate?
So it's not our ramp. No one at Merrill Field uses it. The hospital aircraft, King Airs in particular, when they bring medevac patients in, they needed more ramp space for their aircraft to deliver the patient. But no one else at Merrill Field is using that ramp. It's just hospital aircraft.
And can you go on? Can you then connect that to the 1.2 million or whatever you mentioned earlier?
So the 1.2 was to expand the ramp so that it would
Okay.
accommodate a King Air twin-engine aircraft.
Got it.
Helicopters could come in before with patients, but for the fixed wing coming in from longer distances, it had to be widened, expanded to accommodate that size aircraft.
And can I ask one more?
Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Thank you. And they didn't pay any additional fees. The airport just paid to upgrade that ramp or make it larger. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn Davidson. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so we didn't get a grant from FAA or anything to expand or do any of that construction?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Kennedy?
And if you don't mind going backwards a little bit, can we, back to the lease rates? If somebody does have a contract with a lease, what is provided for them in the current lease at 21 cents a square foot?
Well, that's a good question. They have access to the land to build their enterprise, their businesses on the airport, with access to the runways to do their flight operations.
Okay, but in that, I can follow up a little bit on that. So, but in other words, in terms of the things that you basically highlighted here, those were not considered part of what was provided, or was provided. You're just saying now you're going to charge separately for it. Okay. So are there other things then that will be provided that aren't singled out like this, that will be separately, you're charged additionally?
So if there's a special request made of the office or the maintenance staff, then that will be charged on an individual basis. These things are not listed in the lease, that they will be provided.
Okay, so is there a contract then?
Yes, yes,
If you
ma'am.
don't mind, that has specific things that are provided then? So there is a contract that says this is provided, this is provided.
And I don't know that we
Okay.
actually list what the provisos. But I will send you a copy
Okay, thank you.
of one of our leases.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Mr.
Yeah,
Constant?
just to the hospital issue, just one last note. We've established that we've paid those funds and that the hospital is using them. And we know for a fact that the hospital is billing every one of those patients that comes across the line. So it's not like it's a charitable activity all across the line. So there's definitely some argument there for us to contemplate that.
And the 1.2 million, by the way, came out of the 4.5 land exchange.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Thank you, Mr. Gibbs.
And we have some rental properties, and we're going to increase those rates. Innovation, we've converted some property down next to Airport Drive so that it can be used for vehicle and RV parking, and we can take those rentals, those lease rates, and we can use them for operational expenses. My maintenance team got well ahead. This was an innovation for 2020. We are already parking vehicles there even as we speak.
And billing for those?
And billing.
Ms. Zeletel?
Thank you, Ms. LaFrance. Did we have any additional increased costs associated or with doing that, like insurance? Are they? I mean, I'm a little bit concerned about liability for these cars being parked there. So that's all covered within the cost of what we're charging?
Yes, ma'am, because we already have parking spaces for RVs and cars elsewhere on the airport. We just created an additional 100 spots, and our estimate is that that will bring us an extra $60K a year towards our bottom line.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zeletel.
I'm down to the final 3 slides. This is where the rubber meets the road. So what about our rates when looked at in comparison to CPI? You can see here that for our tail-end tie-down rates, we have been and are below inflation. And I have the raw data down here, which is from a spreadsheet behind this PowerPoint slide. But there's our rates compared to inflation.
Can I ask a question?
Ms. Davidson?
So the last little jump up there in the rates in the blue assumes that the assembly approves the rate increase you're requesting.
Yes,
to
ma'am.
get to this. Okay,
Yes,
thank
ma'am.
you.
It does.
Thank you, Ms. Davidson.
So the pull-through, basically the same story.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm not a pilot, so what's the difference between a pull-through and a tie-down?
So they're all both of these are tie downs. 3 points to tie the aircraft to secure it to the ramp, so that the wings produce lift. That you don't want the wind to come across the wings, produce lift, cause the aircraft to lift up, tip, whatever, so it is tied down.
Right.
Some of these are you back in by tail, and some of them you can just drive through. So if you're coming back from a trip and you want to pull into your spot, drive through. Otherwise, you have to pull up adjacent to it, and pull the tail into your spot. So one is more convenient than the other.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Mr. Constant?
Thank you. So, I don't know if this would be too labor intensive, but could you provide for us before Tuesday the 18th, kind of a sum of what the differential cost is aggregated over all these years by your total number of contracts or flights or whatever, so that we can see an actual number, right? Because what this is this is just per pull-through, that difference that, you know, as it grows to be $7, $8, $5, $15, right? Can we somehow provide ourselves with a document that shows what actual numbers that would be in terms of loss relative to the CPI over the years from 2006 until 2018?
So total dollars?
Right, and kind of that difference between what the consumers have been charged and what the index would have dictated should we be at just basic. Because I imagine that number is pretty substantial.
Sure. Might have to call a friend from the CFO's office, but yes.
It doesn't have to be perfect, it's not an audit.
And I think this is my last slide before questions. So this is the one that may be the most contentious. This is our lease rates going up. I did not have the CPI for 19 and 20, so I took all of the rates and I averaged them to enter those numbers to give me some data points. But as you can see, until 2019, the CPI was above what we were charging. And that concludes my remarks.
Can I still
Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. Yes, Ms. Quinn Davidson?
Thank you, Ms. LaFrance. I'm just wondering, it sounds like the rate increase are probably reasonable. I'm just wondering, what's the competition? The gentleman behind you mentioned some other location. What's the competition and how sort of will the market bear this? Like, do you see any downturn in use at Merrill Field as a result, or what's your forecast of what will happen?
So from my perspective, there are other airports charging less. Some of those are subsidized by the state. We are not. We have to break even. And so that's kind of the driving force behind these numbers.
But presumably those aren't in town, right? I mean, people, you can't
They
use
could.
an airport
It
in
is
Bethel
subsidized by the
instead of
state.
here, probably, right, for most of the needs.
So Girdwood, Birchwood, Lakewood are all subsidized by the state. We are the only unsubsidized airport.
That's fine, but I think what I'm trying to say is there any competition locally or otherwise that would drive folks to leave
Yes, ma'am.
using Merrill Field? And do you suspect that that will happen as a result of the increased fees? The guy behind you is trying to answer too, I think.
Yes.
Yes.
They're all full right now at Lakewood. All those spaces are full. There is not one more parking space at Lakewood right now, if you call it over.
Wow.
They will leave. There's a vacant spot, people are moving. Somebody's already asked me to park in my place.
We'll move to Lakewood, you're saying?
Yes,
And would you,
for $15 a month.
and would you both identify yourselves for the record again, please?
Jerry Patterson Sims.
And Terry Cartier.
Can I ask just a follow-up?
Yes.
Thanks for allowing me to ask all these questions. So it seems, though, that there's a limited amount of competition, right? I mean, right now there's no spots even open at Lakewood. So presumably a lot of the users would probably stick around because there aren't a lot of other options. Or sort of, what's your sort of big picture of how this rate increase will change users of the airport?
May I read the Merrill Field business plan? To enhance the airport's role as a major general aviation transportation servicing anchorage and outlying areas within Alaska, providing services that promote and encourage use of the airport by the general aviation community. develop an overall airport strategy including leasing policy and pricing that attracts aviation port services and related business to Merrill Field and encourage long-term and short-term private sector investments. You've got major people at Merrill Field making major investments. They've added 21 hangars in the previous administration. By raising your rates, you won't see the same rate of development. You're going to drive people away.
But how many people can be driven away? I mean, where are they going to go? I'm trying to.
Starters can move their business across the street and get away from all the intergovernmental charges, get away from that. Airframes Alaska is trying to invest in basically an REI type store for their business, and these guys don't have to be at Merrill Field. They could do this at Lake Hood. They could do it someplace else. They could move across the street from Merrill Field and do it.
So I guess just in sort of summary, I know you can't predict the future, but sort of what percentage of business or what percent, I understand the mission is to provide an airport that people use, but what do you think is going to happen with these rate increases? You think 10% of people are going to leave, but what do you think is going to happen? And just so I know, do you work for the Merrill Field as well, or
no?
Where do you work?
I'm an instructor.
At Merrill Field. Okay, if Mr. Gibbs could answer, I think that would be helpful, just since I appreciate your feedback too, but just since you're at Merrill Field.
It is entirely possible that there might be an initial exodus, but I think, one, we have to break even because we're an enterprise. There have been no rate increases per se since 2012, and I think the services that we offer are better than what they are at Girdwood or Birchwood. So I think after we lose some folks, they will come back. Now, maybe that's pie in the sky, but that's my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Davidson. Mr. Constant, we'll
Yeah.
hold off on some more of that part of the discussion now.
No, I don't know of a lot of these facilities that are being built out on Lake Hood. But would there be a threat if some of these major providers moved across Gamble Street, into the neighborhoods, or might that actually have some secondary benefits to the broader community, the municipality, the tax base, and everything else?
Yes. And could I find someone to go into their spaces? Yes. For example, Rhonda McBride had on TV a couple weeks back the company that has the quadcopter going out to, what's the island? They want to put a factory on the airport so they can do their test flights. So I think there are other businesses that we can attract.
Ms. Zelatil, and then we'll go ahead and move on to the next couple items.
I was just curious, Mr. Gibbs, thank you, Ms. France. What's the percentage of our property on Merrill Field currently leased? Are we full? Are we nearly full at present?
So right now, because we are in the middle of finishing up construction from last year's AIP projects, we have very few, if any at all. We have 3 spaces that aren't leased. And as soon as the construction is finished, then there will be more that we can fill.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zelatil. Mr. Gibbs, I think one thing members of the community would like to see is your SWOT analysis as far as what threats and competition and how you have made this decision and assess the viability. You can put that together. We'll go ahead, and I understand there are more comments and questions, but we have about 15 minutes left. So we'll go ahead to look at the specifics of the AOs. And how many folks here are wanting to speak or testify? 2, 3, 4.
Before that,
Yes, Mr. Johnson.
I would like to ask at least one of the members of the MAC who's here, or who was on the MAC that's here?
I would like to speak.
Okay, so, and we've heard that, we have heard from the MAC. I just want to make sure that we did hear a little bit from the
Okay.
members.
Would you like to have address any specific questions or make a general statement?
I see that there are 3 members here, and I would love to hear, because she lives in the Fairview neighborhood, from Ms. Shamar about her thoughts on this whole conversation.
Can you say what that is?
The Merrill Field Airport Advisory Commission.
Municipal Airport Aviation Advisory, Aviation Airport.
That's me.
Right now, okay. So just for the record, I'm Sharon Shamar, I'm the vice chair of the Airport Commission. I want to say that the commission, we met several times. We had what turned out to be a kind of subcommittee of a whole. We met 4 times from November till just recently. We reviewed, one thing we really looked at is how could the airport raise more money. So we generated a huge list that included things like, setting up a foundation. Someone suggested bake sales. I mean, we really went down into the weeds as far as we could. Then we said, well, which of these are kind of real? Could be brought about fairly easily. What are things that are just kind of unlikely to happen? So, for example, last year we submitted 2 resolutions for the consideration by the Assembly. We asked for a return of 50% of the property taxes that are paid to the municipality from Merrill Field properties, and every year it's around $500,000 that gets paid into the municipality's general fund. We asked for a return of some of the IGCs, and so far there's been no response on that. So we thought, well, maybe that's not feasible. So then we looked at other things. So an increase in the fuel tax. We looked at also the rates. We learned that the rental rates that are being paid are fairly at market, but the lease rates are significantly below market. So that was something that originally Merrill Field Management proposed a 6-cent increase to the lease rates that we kind of thought was a little bit unreasonable. It's a very, very big increase. So there was some modification, and they dropped it down to 4 cents, shifted some of that onto fuel taxes. The reality of it, and I have to say that for many years the Commission was really not aware of the deficit. We became aware of it. The airport has to run. It has to do certain things. It has responsibilities to the leaseholders, to the renters, to have a modern, safe facility. And we don't particularly want to raise rates, but it has to be done. People need to pay for the services they're getting.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, so let's go ahead, and we've got about 12 minutes or so left. Take up item AO 2019-60, and this is the item to update the language for facility damage liability and to adjust mandatory airport fees and charges. Is there anything the administration or wanted to speak on this item? Anything to add, Mr. Falsey?
I think in the interest of time and with so much desire for public comment, we can keep it really brief. These just operationalize the proposals that Ralph has put on the board. One thing to mention is that the existing code allows the airport director to change several kinds of fees without any assembly blessing. We have signaled all of the intent to change those fees that don't require an ordinance change in the summary of economic effects, but we're sort of waiting to do this all as kind of a package.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Falsey. Are there members of the public who would like to speak on the topic of this particular AO right now? Sir, would you like
The only
to?
comment I have is on,
Sir, would you come
Michael
forward
Scoter.
and identify yourself?
Michael Scoter with these fingers.
Thank you.
It says on damaged leases, premises, it's undiscovered who's at fault, damaged with unknowns, that it goes on the left side. That seems a little bit unfair that, it's out of your control. There's a case where a drunk driver went through the wall on Fifth Avenue and took off on foot, and, how's the lessee going to do that? And then I want to make sure that if it's damaged, it's not normal wear and tear. So the airport put these security fences in it for their benefit to keep their grant assurances and normal wear and tear seems like something that the airport should take care of.
Thank you, Mr. Scudder. Mr. Gibbs and Mr. Quincy, would anyone care to respond?
So I agree that the intent of this is someone visiting a lessor, such as a vendor, tries to sneak in behind someone who has just come in through the gate, and by sneaking in without the proper access code, smashes into the gate and costs $3,500. That's what this is for. It's not for charging a leaseholder for wear and tear. It's clear on video damage to the equipment, and it was caused by someone invited by the leaseholder.
Thank you. So it sounds like what you described would be able to address that concern. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. Is there anyone else here? Yes, sir. Would you
Yeah, my
identify
name is
yourself?
David Cottrell. Just for you, I'm a CPA. A couple of questions. I didn't see any, this is an enterprise fund. I didn't see the balance sheet provided. If there was one, I'd like to have a copy of it. And I'm the president of Chugiak Hangars Association, which is the 27 hangars on the northeast side of the field. And the other item I would like to talk about is property taxes. One thing that you talk all around is we pay a substantial amount of property taxes for the hangars. Is any of that money coming back to Merrill Field Enterprise Fund as help to balance the budget? I hear the gentleman over there saying he said no, but you're forgetting that we pay a horrendous amount of property taxes, and no offense, according to the mayor, those property taxes are going to skyrocket next year. And so we're going to have 2 years of massive increases for operational costs at our hangars that we didn't have 5 years ago. The other final comment is, since it is an enterprise fund, is there an equity, and are we yearly using up what our retirement fund is, so to speak, or we actually have no equity in the enterprise fund? I'm pretty sure there's probably a lot of equity. In addition, is there anything on the airport that can be sold that is currently not being used? You're doing a lot of innovations, but is there anything that can be sold to help cover this deficit?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cottrell. We have a question or comment from Mr. Peterson.
Yes, I was thinking, Madam Chair, wondering if we've got security cameras out there to identify who might be doing damage to whatever part of the airport.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Ms.
You, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. So we'll go to Ms. Zelatel and then Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What is the current lease provision for damage? I mean, it's the same. It's just, I mean, I guess I'm not quite certain here. I guess I don't understand why we're looking at the change. I mean, I would assume the lease provisions already include that if you damage it, you pay for it.
It does not specifically state that.
Oh, our current leases don't say that.
So that's why the language is being proposed to be changed so that in the leases, if they break it, they pay for it.
And Mr. Chair, I think this is also intending to like leased premise damage, so you're breaking the gate on your way to your leased property, but the gate is not on the leased premises.
And previously, our leases didn't take care of that.
I don't think so, but like I said, that's a phone back, we'll give you the template.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zelatel. Okay, and Mr. Cottrell, we'll circle back with you on your questions, some responses. Let's move on to
Before that, just quickly, I was
Mr. Thompson.
just
Oh, I'm sorry.
on the topic of that question, I'm curious to know how the roads are maintained and all the kind of repaving and other projects that happen on the roadways on Merrill Field, so that we can get a sense of what the tax revenues pay for out there. Because I would imagine that there are some expenses that aren't just on the books of Merrill Field, but there are municipal expenses too. So.
Through the chair.
Mr. Gibbs.
That all comes through AIP funds. There are no city funds maintaining our road. It's the Merrill Field Drive that goes through the middle of the airport.
Yes, yes, sir.
I'd like to speak.
Okay, to testify?
Yes.
Or, okay, if you would identify yourself.
Terry Garcia. The airport in the last 4 years has got $39.690 million. Of that, $37.82 million has come from the FAA, and the matching funds came from the leaseholders and the land sales. That came to $1.87 million. Leaseholders paid that, not the city, the leaseholders. In the last 8 years, the city has contributed nothing to Merrifield, nothing. And here's a copy of the land sale. Here's a copy of what the intergovernmental fees cost the airport. If you look at that, that's a 220% in 4 years, basically paying for the computer. And I would ask on the intergovernmental charges, is it correct or not correct, Mr. Falsey, is municipality of Anchorage dumping snow on Merrifield property? Yes or no?
I don't know the answer to that question.
And if they are they paying to Merrifield the intergovernmental charges back? Currently, there is no leaseholder or the MAC has the authority to stop any increase in anything, any of the AIP grants. All of these grants don't necessarily enhance the leaseholder's property, it enhances the city. So if you have a hangar and they're buying more property across the way, it has nothing to do with my hangar and increasing my value of my hangar. That's something the city should share, not us paying for something that we don't use.
Thank you, sir. We are documenting questions and concerns, and if anyone thinks of additional questions or wants to make sure that we've received it, please send your questions or email them to Mayor Mr. Constant or the clerk's office. To me? To me. Let's move on just quickly in the last couple of minutes here to AO 2019-61. And this is the intermediate term borrowing program. And looks like we may have lost Mr. Slivka. Mr. Falsey, did you want to comment on that one at a high level?
Maybe I'll turn one over to Ralph Zimmer, who's here to talk as well.
Okay. Mr. Gibbs.
Ma'am, so the 1.6 million short-term borrowing program put together by the CFO's office covers the 18 matching funds. Those are already downrange. There's nothing I can do to roll that back. That occurred before I got here. And for the 19 projects that we may or may not pull the trigger on those, but that's the funding for those matching requirements plus the debt service. So that AO is for that 1.6 million. Authorization, as I understand it, Ross, to use up to that amount, but it doesn't require me to use all of it.
May I ask who that loan is from?
Mr. Gibbs?
Ross, that 1.6 million, who's the banker on that?
Our additional education is key bank.
Thank you, sir. Key Bank.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. Were there any members of the public who wanted to speak specifically on this particular AO? Yes, sir?
Michael Scott again. I know there's others here, but just real quickly, for some perspective, I was on the airport commission for 12 years. Meister and Fink, Knowles, and Wersch administrations. That was during the time that landfill was closed. The city got this property under a patent in the 20s with the reservation, the reversionary clauses that had to be an airport. For many years, the city benefited from putting garbage in there, charging the general public for trash removal, and when they were going to exit in 1986, the airport, we weren't an airport enterprise utility yet, it was pretty close on the rise. He says, well, what about this long-term liability? It's going to be very expensive to compact this trash. There's methane gas, there's toxic problems. You left almost a Superfund site at our airport. It's not simple to go move some dirt and build a new ramp. This is the second time that we're rebuilding ramps and taxiways and so forth. The deal then was, from those prior administrations and heads of solid waste services, was we'll help you with your money because we've got a good benefactor out there with the FAA that was understanding, that didn't stop it from being used as a dump for the many years that it was. So that deal's changed. Also, the state for many years provided half of that, 6.5%. So that's a change that's happened in the last 2 years. We all know what's happened in the state, but I'm a leaseholder. I'm all right with, I'm acquiesced to what the small change is. I'm really concerned about we're borrowing for 2 years money that we've already spent as matching funds, and we're taking a 15-year note on it. What's this look like 10 years out? We're going to keep borrowing money and adding to this fund and increasing our revenue. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate the hard work of the Assembly and administration, but there were promises made that take care of the dump issues that are out there.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Gibbs?
Madam Chair, specifically in response to that, we've put together a plan that spends some dollars over the next 2 years and then zeroes out all AIP grants for 4 years. We are allowed by the FAA not to take any AIP grants for up to 4 years and then start up again. That is our plan so that we can get healthy fiscal.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. We are out of time. Did everyone who wanted to speak in the public get to speak? Okay, if you have questions, please email me, suzanne.lafrance@muni.org, or text me at 907-351-7199. And it's likely, Mr. Chair, we may have to have a work session at some point.
Sometimes.
Yeah. On
8 a.m.
these issues. Thank you all for your participation. We are adjourned.